Does everything look good?
Looks good.
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And welcome everyone to our presentation today. Oh, it's going on its own. My name is Amy Keenan. I'm the Director of Channel Management here at Blue Moon Industries. And of course, we have Janice as well joining us, and she will be the one actually doing the demo and answering all your questions. She's our Senior Application Consultant. And we're going to share a little bit about who we are before we get started. So we are a Microsoft Gold Certified ISV. We've actually been developing products for the Microsoft channel since 1994. So over 30 years, we're very excited about the longevity and the solutions we provide. We've not only been in the Dynamics GP space, but we have it for 365, BC, F&O, and Acumatica as well. And we also recently acquired Encore Business Solutions GP add-on products, and we have over 1,000 customers using our solutions today. So let's talk a little bit about chargebacks. Do you wish there was an easier way to track and manage those from those major retailers that you work with, as well as process the high volume of credit and debit memos, because that can be very manual, that can be very time consuming. So we all wish there was an easier way to deal with that. So what if you could add this capability to Dynamics GP or BC, create categories of adjustments based on the types of chargebacks that you do accept. And this PowerPoint just wants to do what it wants. Configure, allow, and disallow rules for the chargebacks based on the adjustment types, as well as automatically create accounts receivable documents for those unallowed adjustments. So let's talk a little bit about chargeback processing, and I'm going to send it over to Janice.
All right, so in our chargeback processing product, and you will see as we go through the demo, we provide you with a one-step entry of chargebacks during that cash receipt process. So as opposed to many alternative methods, which would be creating sort of fake credit memos, applying them against the invoices, then another step of applying that payment, we've turned this process into a single ability to put the cash receipt in along with all of these adjustments. You'll see when we take a look at the product that we've also streamlined the entire entry of a remittance from a customer like this, which often does include invoices they're paying, legitimate credit memos that might have been processed already, and then these chargebacks, which are sort of the unknown that's coming in along with that payment, and you don't know about them until they actually take them and put them onto a remittance. And so for us, that type of customer and who needs this product is really anyone that's working with major retail chains, really regardless of their industry, because those major chains are notorious for taking chargebacks for things like delivering to the wrong dock door, not delivering during the proper time when the dock is open, compliance errors, the stickers or the barcoding on the box or the packaging was not appropriate. And it also ranges all the way to things like advertising co-op. If you work with true retailers, you might be getting $1,200 of co-op a month in order for those your products to be, let's say, showcased. So the retailer might be taking a credit to put you on the end cap or something like that. So there's a variety of reasons that these chargebacks happen. But what's also sort of maddening is being able to track the different types. Are you getting suddenly a bunch of compliance errors? Do you have an issue with your provider of your barcodes? Do you have a freight problem with suddenly getting charged back for not delivering during the delivery window? Your delivery company is coming outside that window, therefore they're charging you back for that. So getting that visibility to the reasons why you have these chargebacks, to me, is a very big part of this, in addition to just streamlining the processing of the payment itself. So I think we're going to take a look at this point. So if you can hand me the controls, I will
Sure.
my screen. And I'll take it from here. So, All right.
It's good.
Great. Okay, so we're going to take a look first at our product in the Dynamics GP space, and then at the end, we're going to be taking a look at some of the screenshots of our newest release of our chargeback processing for Business Central. So just to set the stage, we are fully integrated within both products. So we don't sit outside, you're not going to some other product. All of our windows are fully integrated into the actual ERP system. So in this case, Dynamics GP. So without turning this into a training session, I just want to have us take a peek at our setup window. And the reason I like to do this is not to overwhelm you with setup decisions here, but just show you that we take a kind of a lot of pride in our setup windows, because we want you to be able to configure this product the way you work. And this is where you and your partner come in, and you're telling us how you work within chargeback processing, and we're working with you and your partner to make sure that it's implemented the way you need it to. So it's not just a product that's sort of slapped together and that, yep, try to process the chargebacks. We've got a lot of rules in here. We've got a lot of options, such as auto posting. Again, another thing that can keep this process streamlined. Being able to process a zero value check, which is Dynamics GP is extremely unhappy with a $0 check, but sometimes those credit memos and adjustments applied against those invoices do create a zero situation. So what we've tried to do here is create a window that encompasses all of those different options that you might have along the way, and then give us the ability to then work with you to configure them the way you want. And therefore, even with these adjustment creation rules, if you are in a position where you're importing that remittance via EDI, we can set some automation creation rules so that if an invoice comes in short paid without a specific adjustment tied to it, we can create a specific type that maybe is something that needs to be researched later. So I just wanted to give you that kind of flavor of our setup window, just to give you a sense of how deeply we think about these products and really how we want those setup options to behave. So we talked a little bit about different types of adjustments, and those are set up for us in our adjustments type window, which is under the cards along with your other master records. What we do here is give you the ability, and I've got a few samples here. This is just my sample database of different types of adjustments. Sometimes the retailers drive that number. So I know, for example, with Walmart, these are some of their numbers that they use. A 22 is the merchandise is billed, not shipped. The freight was returned, defective merchandise, handling charges, defective merchandise on a return versus an allowance. So you have a lot of capability of either using the codes from the retailer or just creating a map from those codes to your own, or using, as this example down here, is a number of just alpha character types that will describe the different types of adjustments that you may be receiving from your vendors. Now, I will say that we've had, from your customers. So we've had a number of situations where we have customers that create one, known and unknown, or just unknown. They just assume they're going to research it later. They don't need the research at this point. They just want to get that cash receipt processed, and then they're going to go from there. Then we have kind of the other end of that spectrum, where we have people that have hundreds of different adjustment types because they want to get very specific to the type. They want to get very specific maybe to the type, the division, the department, the location, whatever it might be, and however their chart of accounts is configured. Because what you'll see here is when I choose, for example, advertising co-op, the general ledger has a role in this, because everything that's posting from your receivable side is posting all the way through your general ledger. And therefore, the general ledger plays a role in how that particular transaction is processed from the financial perspective. So for us, with each one of these chargeback adjustment types, we have either, if you have a credit or a debit memo, you can set up this predefined debit memo number. We use an X as the first character, and then the adjustments type ID. And this gives you, again, that ability to report or analyze these different types of adjustments. So if you use the Smart List, or you use SQL reporting services, or you use Power BI, or whatever your tool of choice is, anything that starts with an X is an unallowed chargeback that's back on the customer's account while you do that research. And we're going to walk through this process shortly. The other thing that we do is give you that chargeback account. Maybe with advertising co-op, you know they're getting their $2,000 a month. You're just going to allow that. You don't need to research it. That's how it works. They get it every month. And we want it to offset our advertising expense. So they're taking that credit, and then we're using that to offset any advertising expenses we have. The other side of that is if we don't allow it, meaning that we're not sure whether they can take this or not. Often, let's say if they have an adjustment that means that you didn't deliver it correctly, or that there was defective merchandise or something of that nature, you might want to do your own research on that. And in the meantime, you're going to hit this clearing account that will just be the holding account for this particular transaction until you actually decide whether the customer owes you the money, or yes, you are actually in a compliance fine situation, and you'll put that credit memo in to the appropriate account and then clear off that debit memo. So you can also set up the system so that certain customers are set up for allowing and disallowing. So you might have certain customers that you don't question the advertising co-op. Well, you might also have some customers that are, that are frequent flyers of taking two credits in the same month, or maybe, they're just not set up on the adjustment the proper way, and you don't want to allow it. You want to analyze it each time and then decide whether that it's a valid chargeback or not. So you can decide that on a per customer basis if you want, or you can go by the customer class and allow or disallow particular chargeback through that method. So once everything is set up, then they just kind of wait for a cash receipt to come in. So I'm just going to pull over my transactions menu. Now, if you want to, you can use the traditional cash receipts entry window, put in the amount of that payment, and then put in your associated adjustments. But we've also created a new window called Remittance Entry. And this is a little bit different window because it allows you to process that entire cash receipt remittance in a single window, rather than going and addressing, let's say, any valid credit memos that might be on that cash receipt first, and then coming in here to process the remainder of the remittance, which is what you would do in the standard cash receipts window. So what I'm going to do here is create a remittance here for our customer. I'm just going to put it into my batch here. And then pick my customer. And then what I'm going to see here are all of my outstanding invoices for this customer. I would also see any outstanding credit memos for this customer, all in a single window. I wouldn't have to go to one window to process credit memos and then come back in here. If I come into this window, I have my amount of my payment, which in this case is $35,412.31. And that could be my usual cash check credit card. Put in my check number here. And then I can see that I have these invoices, and maybe on my remittance, I see that these 4 invoices are paid in full. However, in addition, they've taken some credit memos because I can already see that if I total this up, it's going to be more than $35,000. So what I'm going to do is go into my adjustments window, and I'm going to create those credit memo adjustments, or those chargebacks, that are also on that particular remittance. And this is where that list of your different types comes into play. If they did have the advertising co-op, and that was for April, I could put in that advertising co-op for $1,000. If they said we delivered improperly, we had a compliance error, maybe we had something that was going on with our labeling or something of that nature, they will typically give you a reference number. And this is the reference number that you're going to need to use to dispute this credit adjustment that they've put on their particular remittance. Most of the time, what will happen is, traditionally, we find people short paying all of these invoices because that's what the customer technically did. But if you try to go back to that retail customer and say, hey, you left, $25 on invoice 123, they're going to say, nope, we show invoice 123 is paid in full. But if you go back to them with this reference number that say, we've got a compliance error, it was reported to us on reference number 110000, then they will use that number to research the information and be able to give you more details about why they took that credit based on that compliance error. And the same goes for really any chargeback, any type, the freight, maybe they're taking an RMA credit and they haven't returned the items to you yet. Then what happens is you could take that and unallow it. And then what will happen later is that when they do actually return the items and you put a legitimate credit memo in, you can apply it against that waiting debit memo and avoid them taking the credit twice. So I'll just put a return in there and their RMA number that's on here, and then I'll put that in for $1,000. Now, keep in mind that I'm doing these manually just for the purposes of our presentation today. However, we do have an ability for you to integrate this remittance either from via EDI or some other type of import. So if you're getting an email with a file that shows all of the remittances and all of the payments that have been processed against your account from these customers, and you want to import that information in along with all of the chargebacks and the payment application against all of the invoices and credit memos, you do have that option as well. So you can automate this even further. So now what you'll see here is with my $3,000 in chargebacks, I have the original $35,000, but now essentially I have $38,000 to use on my unapplied amount. So as I mark these invoices, you'll see that amount go down, and then eventually will go down to zero. So I could do that in a single action and apply everything. I could apply it individually. I could still do a partial apply if they were still, as part of that, only paying $30,000 of a $50,000 invoice. Whatever I need to do here, I can do this. Now, the other thing that's going to kick in that you saw in that setup window is that, let's say on top of this, there is an unapplied amount. Maybe they transposed a number, 34 cents instead of 43 cents or something like that. If there is a shortage and you've set that up in your setup window, a window will pop up and ask you, hey, do you want to just create a chargeback on the fly for that remaining amount to pay that invoice in full? And you can say yes or no. But if you say yes, you can already have a default chargeback adjustment type in the wings, if you will, to apply against any inadvertent short pays on this particular remittance. So for the accountants in the group, I'm going to click on my distribution window. So kind of hold on to your hats a little bit here. What this is going to do is give us all those journal entries that we talked about earlier based on whether these adjustments that were in the chargeback window were allowed or not allowed. So what you'll see here is what you would expect: debit, cash, credit, receivables, no magic there. But then as we get into this quote unquote other section, which if you're familiar with Dynamics GP, you'll know that this has an effect on the general ledger without impacting the amount that's here, because all we did was receive $35,000 in cash. In addition, we had adjustments that are going to affect our accounts receivable balance, but are not going to increase the amount that we received from this customer, which is why we're using the type of other. So for the items that were allowed, and if you recall, that was mainly the and only the advertising co-op, then that is hitting the $1,000 against that advertising account. I'm just going to expand this and make it more confusing, maybe, but maybe more clear here. So in this case, I'm crediting the receivables and debiting advertising expense because I had that credit on there for the adjustment. The rest of them are just going to flow in and then out of that clearing account, because what will happen when I go ahead and process this transaction, it's first going to create a cash receipt badge, and then it's going to post that cash receipt badge through and create debit memos as placeholders for everything that we did not allow. So I'm just going to drill down here and just walk that through. The advertising co-op, we did allow, but everything else, the compliance error, charging us back for freight for some reason, and then that RMA taking the credit before the items have been received, those we just either want to dispute or we just don't agree with that in that particular scenario. So I'm going to go ahead and process this. Now, I've processed this in a way that's going to just create that apply window, show us everything that was applied and how it was applied. And then I'm stopping this at my cash receipts entry window. This is a place where you can also have auto posting, but I just wanted to walk you through each step as we go through. So now my batch, my chargeback processing JP batch, has one payment in it. It has it for $35,000. If I print my edit list here, what it's going to do, and this is an alternate version of the edit list that we've created, it's going to show me that I have my remittance here. It was for an amount of $35,000. Standard cash receipts edit list, with the exception of the addition here, where we've put in the different types with their reference number and their amount, whether we allowed them or not, the totals, and then essentially our totals here that are totaling up to the amount that we applied, which was like $38,000. This is an optional remittance. So if you said, oh, Janice, we've got so many items here. If we put all of the adjustments on here, this thing would be gigantic. This is an optional alternate window that you can, or alternate report that you can install. You don't need to do this, but if you think that there's some value in looking at the adjustments, confirming their amounts, etc., then you certainly have this ability to run this at the edit list and then also at the posting journal level. So I'm going to go ahead and post this, and then it will post over to the general ledger or through, depending on how you have your system set up. It will certainly put that cash receipt over on the banking side, either auto deposited using the new functionality in 18.4 or waiting to be deposited as part of a bank deposit. And then what it's going to do is it's going to do a second posting, and it's going to post those debit memos that I did not allow. So I'm going to close my cash receipts posting journal. So now for each one of the debit memos that I did not agree with, that I want to research before actually committing that they do not owe us this money, it's going to create a debit memo. It's going to create one for our compliance error. It's going to create one for our freight, and it's going to create one for that RMA that they took prior to having us receive the goods back. So now if I look at this customer's account in the inquiry, what I'm going to see is that those open inquiries, those open debit memos, and then also with the X in front of them, I'm going to see my remittance that will show that they did pay us $35,412.31. And if I drill down on that remittance, I'm going to see the amount, and then I can also see all of the adjustments that were made as part of it, all of those chargebacks that were created, the debit memos, if appropriate, that were created with a drill down here, and also their amounts, and then reconfirming here whether they were allowed or not allowed. The other thing I'm going to see here is each debit memo. So the compliance error, the freight, etc. When I drill down here on the document number, I'm going to see this debit memo for that particular chargeback with the reference number. So now if I'm looking to report back to the customer and saying, hey, we'd like to dispute a few of the chargebacks on here, I can actually send them a document if I want to and format it as a receivables document. I could send it to them via email. I could send them the list and ask them to explain to us why we were in compliance, why they're not paying the freight on a shipment, why they returned or took the credit when they haven't returned the item to us. Whatever those reason codes might be, you can now track that here and report on them. And even at a multi-customer level, I'm just going to use the smart list as my example here. I do have the ability to look up the chargeback detail and see all of the chargebacks out there. But if I feel like I'm into a situation where we're getting all kinds of freight chargebacks, maybe what I'm going to do with my smart list is just tell it, I just want to look up a specific adjustment type. just one type of chargeback. I just have this feeling that something's going kind of weird with the freight. We keep getting charged back, not just from one customer, but from a lot of different customers. Why do we keep getting charged back for the freight? So we could go back and analyze, that we've had this happen for a while. We actually did have a customer who did this. They had a specific freight carrier that they were using that ended up changing because the one company went out of business. They went on with another company, and suddenly they started getting chargebacks for freight from these retailers. And what was happening is that he didn't have the right information for delivery hours. He was pulling up to the loading dock outside of the business times that they were supposed to. They were still allowing him to unload, but then they were charging back our customer for the freight because they were outside of that window, because they were just coming whenever they wanted to. They weren't really paying attention to the rules. So they could very easily see, we have this problem. They went so far as to add a few more parameters, like the delivery area, like the city and state, so they could see they were all coming from this one delivery truck route, and they could then fix that problem. So sometimes, it's just a matter of analyzing the different kinds of chargebacks, because the retailers are who they are, and they often will charge you back for very tiny things, or allegedly alleged things that you may not even agree with. But by the same token, if you feel like you're starting to get some repeats, it gives you that ability to analyze everything. And then, like I said, if, maybe you do reach out to the retailer, and for some reason, they either agree that, yep, you're right, you know what, that really wasn't outside of compliance, we'll go ahead and pay that. They'll go ahead and make that payment. And when they make that payment, you'll just go right back in and you'll apply it against that particular chargeback. So on the next payment that they have, if you come in here and pick that customer, what you'll see is, in this case, you'll see just those 3 unallowed adjustments. And maybe they're just paying the compliance error, the freight or the RMA. Of course, the RMA is just waiting for the returned product to be applied against it. But if you agree, yeah, that was a screw up on our part, you're right, then you would put in a valid credit memo and just apply that credit memo against that freight debit memo. And then that would be the end of it. And it would be that credit memo, when you come in to put that in, that would give you the appropriate general ledger accounts for, whatever it might be, a freight adjustment or another adjustment for whatever type of original chargeback that was charged against that customer's account. So that's really the flow of the chargeback processing module. It is meant to be incorporated into payment processing, so it isn't a separate action that you'll be doing. It does avoid you having to process credit memos first, and this first, and this first, and then process the cash receipt. It does allow you to do all of that together. And then also allowing you to make that even more electronic by integrating in that remittance with the adjustments, or integrating the payment and then putting the adjustments in. Either one of those is also a time saver, so that you're not just working from spreadsheets to multiple data entry windows. You've got everything done in one single window. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop sharing here so that we can see the slideshow, because what we have coming soon is our new chargeback processing for Business Central. So Amy, if you want to pop the slideshow up, we can just go to that slide. And so we just have a slide here that talks about the adjustment maintenance. So what happens with the chargeback processing in Business Central is, again, it's a fully integrated chargeback processing module. It's not outside of Business Central. It's built right in. And as you'll see in this window, which is a lot of other, we've got a few other windows coming soon as well. It is does have all of those adjustment types that we talked about, the chargeback account versus the clearing account. We also will tie it to the reason code functionality in Business Central, so that you have all of that reporting as well. and then our allowing versus not allowing that functionality as well, and then tying that to the customers. So the process within Business Central is going to be very similar. That cash receipts payment entry process will then give you the ability to add in the chargeback information and then be able to process that remittance, tracking all of the different adjustment types, and then of course being able to report and analyze those at a later date. So, so we're hoping that, that if this is an issue that you have today, that you will take a look at our chargeback processing product. We feel that, it has been one of our very first products. So it's been something that we've certainly continued to add features to over the years, but we found that customers that are in this space working with retailers have a much greater ability to quickly process their cash receipts and analyze these chargebacks than they do, without having this add-on in their either Dynamics GP or Business Central system. So at this point, we have time here for any questions that people might have, or what you could do is submit the questions and we can then get back to you individually, or certainly submit them back to the the person you work with at your partner organization, so they can get us any questions or additional information that you might need. Back to you.
All right. Amy. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or chat, and I believe Gabriel will read them off to us and we'll get them answered for you now.